The playground smelled like cut grass and wood chips warming under the October sun. Mark Grayson was losing at tag. Again, his sneakers, two big hand-me-downs from a cousin, kept slipping off his heels as he ran. He was small for 10 years old, all knobby knees and grass-stained elbows, laughing so hard his chest hurt. "You're it, Mark. You're still it," Tyler Morrison shouted from the monkey bars, grinning with that gap where his front tooth used to be. Mark pumped his legs harder. The distance closed. 5 feet. 3 feet. Tyler was right there reaching for the next bar, completely exposed. "Got you." Mark reached out. His hand connected with Tyler's shoulder. The sound came first, a crack like a tree branch snapping in a storm, then the shockwave. The air itself seemed to compress and explode outward. Tyler's shoulder didn't just break, it shattered. The bone pierced through skin in 3 places, white fragments jutting out at angles that made no anatomical sense. Tyler's body launched backward, 40 feet, straight through the playground equipment. The metal slide bent inward where his spine hit it. The impact made a sound like a car crash. Tyler rolled another 10 feet across the grass, leaving a streak of red. Mark stood frozen, arms still extended. His hand was clean, no blood, not his blood. Around him children screamed. The sound was shrill, primal, the kind of screaming that meant something fundamental had broken in the world. A girl near the swings vomited. A boy ran toward the school building, crying for a teacher. Mark looked at his hand, his normal 10-year-old hand. It looked the same as it had 30 seconds ago when he was tying his shoe, when the world made sense. Tyler wasn't moving anymore. His right arm was bent backward at the elbow, bone visible through torn fabric. Blood pooled in the grass around his head. Mark's mouth opened. No sound came out. His brain tried to process. "I tagged him. I just wanted to tag him. This isn't real. This is a nightmare. I'm going to wake up." A teacher was running now. Mrs. Patterson, her phone already out, screaming into it. "We need an ambulance at Lakeview Elementary now. A child is injured. I don't know how. It looks like... Oh God, there's so much blood." Stopped. What if he made it worse? What if touching him again? The sky darkened, not clouds, not weather, a shadow cast by something descending fast. The other children looked up. Their screaming changed pitch, became something else. Awe mixed with terror. Mark looked up. His father was falling from the sky, not falling, descending, controlled. Omni-Man's red and white uniform was pristine against the blue October sky. He didn't slow down gradually. He just stopped 10 feet above the ground, then dropped the remaining distance. The impact cracked the pavement beneath his boots. A spiderweb pattern spread outward from where he landed. He hadn't been gentle about it. Nolan Grayson didn't look at Tyler's broken body, didn't check on the crying children, didn't acknowledge Mrs. Patterson, who had frozen mid-sentence on her phone call, staring at Earth's greatest hero standing in her playground. He walked directly to Mark. Each step was purposeful, measured. He grabbed Mark's wrist, not roughly but firmly, and lifted his son's hand to eye level. He examined it, turned it over, checked the knuckles, the palm, the fingers. Mark stared at his father's face, looking for something, concern, fear, horror at what his son had just done. What he saw made his stomach drop. His father was smiling. Not a big smile, just a slight upturn at the corners of his mouth. His eyes were bright, focused, analytical, like a scientist confirming a successful experiment. Finally, Nolan said. The word was quiet. Not spoken to Mark, spoken to himself, to the universe. A confirmation of something he'd been waiting for. "Dad, I didn't mean to. Tyler, he's hurt. I just touched him and he..." Nolan's hand moved to Mark's shoulder. The grip was iron. "We're leaving. But I have to explain. I have to tell them I didn't mean. Now, Mark." Mrs. Patterson found her voice. "Mr. Grayson, wait. We need to know what happened. The paramedics are coming. Mark needs to..." He lifted Mark, one arm around his son's waist like picking up a suitcase, and flew. The acceleration was immediate, violent. Mark's stomach lurched as the ground fell away. The school became a toy model. The city became a map. The air was freezing at this altitude, thin enough that Mark's lungs burned trying to pull oxygen. Mark tried to look back, tried to see if Tyler was okay, if the ambulance had arrived, if anyone was helping him. Nolan's grip tightened. Eyes forward. They weren't going home. Mark realized this after 2 minutes of flight, watching the suburbs give way to rural farmland, then to nothing, No houses, no roads, just empty land. Nolan descended into an abandoned quarry. The walls were limestone, pockmarked with old drill holes. Rusted equipment sat half-buried in weeds. No one had worked here in decades. Nolan landed hard, released Mark. Mark stumbled, fell to his knees on the rocky ground. His hands scraped against stone. It should have hurt. It didn't. The skin didn't even break. "Stand up." Mark stood. His legs were shaking. "Dad, what's happening? What did I do? Tyler's hurt and I don't understand." "Tyler is irrelevant." Nolan's voice was flat, clinical. "You need to understand what you are. I'm Mark. I'm your son. You are not human." The words hit like a physical blow. Mark's mouth opened, closed. "What?" "You were never human. Your mother's genetics were a gamble, a necessary one for the mission, but a gamble. I didn't know if the Viltrumite DNA would express, if you'd be viable, useful." Nolan circled Mark slowly, examining him. 20 years on this planet, waiting to see if you'd manifest, and today, finally you did. "I don't understand. Viltrumite? I'm from Earth. I was born in Cleveland. Mom is nothing more. Her genetics were compatible enough to carry you to term, but you are not her species." Nolan stopped circling, stood directly in front of Mark. "You are Viltrumite. You are a weapon of the Empire, and your childhood is over." Mark's brain couldn't process this. It kept trying to reboot, to find a framework where his father, his dad, who taught him to ride a bike, who made pancakes on Sundays, who read him bedtime stories, was saying these things and meaning them. "But Dad, I didn't mean to hurt Tyler. It was an accident. I just need to learn to control." Nolan's hand moved. Not a punch, just a backhand. Casual. The way you'd swat a fly. Mark's body flew 200 feet backward. He hit the quarry wall hard enough to crater the limestone. His vision went white. Pain exploded through his back, his shoulders, his skull. Real pain. The first real pain he'd felt since this morning. He slid down the wall, landed in a heap at its base. Blood in his mouth. Copper taste. His ears were ringing. Nolan walked toward him, not rushing, just walking. That word, Dad, is a human weakness, an emotional attachment that serves no tactical purpose. You are my son by blood and genetic inheritance. You will address me as father, commander, or Nolan. Choose one. Choose now. Mark was crying. He didn't realize it until he tasted salt mixing with the copper. I don't understand." "You will." Nolan reached down, grabbed Mark's uniform shirt, lifted him to eye level. "Your human socialization has made you soft, sentimental, attached to concepts like accident and friend and hurt. These are diseases. I will cure you of them. Please, I just want to go home. I want Mom. Nolan dropped him. "We are going home, and you will not speak to your mother about this. You will not cry in front of her. You will not show weakness. Weakness is contagious. Do you understand?" Mark didn't understand, couldn't understand, but he nodded anyway. Because the look in his father's eyes, his father who wasn't his father anymore, who maybe never had been, told him that not nodding would mean more pain. "Good. Stand up. Wipe your face. We leave in 30 seconds. Mark stood on shaking legs, used his sleeve to wipe the tears and blood. His back was already healing. He could feel it. The pain receding, bones knitting back together. It should have been impossible. It was happening anyway. Nolan grabbed him again. They flew back toward the city. Toward home, toward a house that would never feel safe again. The flight back was silent except for the wind. Mark kept his eyes closed, tried to pretend this was a nightmare, tried to will himself to wake up in his bed late for school, with his biggest problem being a math quiz he hadn't studied for. But the wind was real. The cold was real. The iron grip around his waist was real. And when they landed in the backyard, not gently with another pavement-cracking impact, the smell of dinner cooking through the kitchen window was real. Mom was inside, making meatloaf, humming to herself, having a normal Thursday evening. Mark wanted to run to her, to tell her everything, to beg her to fix this, to make Dad normal again, to explain that there had been some terrible mistake. Nolan's hand on his shoulder stopped him. "Remember, no weakness, no emotion, or I will remove the source of that weakness, permanently." The threat was clear. Mark looked up at his father's face, saw the truth there. Nolan would hurt Mom, would kill her, and wouldn't hesitate. Mark nodded. They walked inside together. Father and son. Predator and prey. Debbie Grayson turned from the stove, smiled. There you are. I got a call from school about some kind of accident during recess. They said a student was hurt, but they couldn't give details. Mark, are you okay? You look pale. Nolan's hand tightened on his shoulder. Mark is fine, Nolan said. His voice was warm now, familiar. The dad voice, the mask was back on. There was an incident on the playground. We handled it. Mark won't be returning to Lakeview Elementary. Debbie's smile faded. What? Nolan, what happened? Mark's education will continue at home. Under my supervision, Nolan's hand left Mark's shoulder, moved to Debbie's waist. Gentle, loving. This isn't a discussion, Debbie. The decision is made. Something in his tone made Debbie freeze. Mark watched his mother's face change, watched her see something she'd been trained not to see, watched her realize that the man she'd married, the man she'd trusted with her life and her child's life, was a stranger. Nolan, her voice was small, uncertain. What's going on? Adaptation. Nolan kissed her forehead. You'll adjust, Debbie. You're stronger than you think. Or, he pulled back, looked into her eyes. You're not, and adjustments will be made. The choice is yours. He released her, walked past her into the living room, turned on the television, sat down like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just threatened his wife in her own kitchen, Debbie stood frozen at the stove. The wooden spoon in her hand was shaking. Mark wanted to hug her, wanted to tell her it would be okay. But he couldn't. Because it wouldn't be. Mark, honey. Debbie's voice cracked. Why don't you go upstairs? I'll call you when dinner is ready. Couldn't see her crying. If he saw her crying, he'd cry too. And crying was weakness. He climbed the stairs to his room, closed the door, sat on his bed. His room was exactly as he'd left it this morning. Posters of dinosaurs on the walls, Lego sets on the shelves, a stuffed T-Rex on his pillow that he secretly still slept with, even though he was 10 and too old for stuffed animals. Everything was the same. Everything was different. Mark stared at his hands, these hands that had shattered Tyler's bones, these hands that were stronger than steel and didn't know their own power, these hands that weren't human hands anymore. Downstairs, he heard his mother crying, trying to be quiet about it, failing. He heard his father's voice, calm, patient, explaining something Mark couldn't make out through the floor. He heard his mother's crying get quieter, then stop, then nothing. Mark lay down on his bed, stared at the ceiling. The glow-in-the-dark stars he'd stuck up there when he was 7 formed constellations he didn't know the names of. He thought, tomorrow Dad will apologize. Tomorrow this will make sense. Tomorrow I'll wake up and this will have been a nightmare. But he knew it wasn't true. The way you know things when you're 10 years old and the world has just shown you its real face for the first time. Tomorrow would not bring apologies. Tomorrow would bring training. And the boy who played tag on playgrounds, who loved dinosaurs and Lego sets, and his mother's meatloaf, was already starting to die. Outside his window, the sun was setting. The sky was beautiful, orange and pink and purple bleeding together. Mark watched it and felt nothing. The awakening was complete. The quarry at dawn was cold. Mark's breath came out in white puffs as he stood on the limestone floor, wearing a t-shirt and shorts. His regular clothes. Kid clothes. Nolan stood 20 feet away in full Omni-Man uniform, arms crossed, watching. This was day 2, 24 hours since Tyler Morrison's broken body. 24 hours since the world ended. Fly to that ridge. Nolan pointed to an outcropping 300 feet up the quarry wall. Mark looked up at it, looked back at his father. I don't know how to fly. You do. Your body knows, your DNA knows. Your conscious mind is the obstacle. Nolan's voice was instructional, clinical. Flight is not learned. It is remembered. Your Viltrumite genetics have the information, access it. But I've never... Jump. Mark didn't move. Nolan's expression didn't change. You have 3 seconds to comply. 3, 2, Mark jumped. Not up. His brain wouldn't let him try something so impossible. He jumped forward, away from his father, toward the quarry wall. Maybe he could climb it. Maybe... Nolan moved, grabbed Mark mid-jump by the ankle, spun, released. Mark flew, actually flew. Tumbling, spinning, no control. The quarry wall rushed at him at 60 miles per hour. He tried to scream. The air was punched out of his lungs by the impact. The limestone exploded around him. He cratered into it. embedded 3 feet deep. Rock dust choked him. His left arm was bent wrong. Pain, real, sharp, impossible to ignore, screamed through his nervous system. He tried to pull himself out of the crater. His arm wouldn't work right, bone grinding against bone. He was crying again. Couldn't help it. 10 years old and his arm was broken, and his father had just thrown him into a wall. Nolan landed on the outcropping above him. Your arm will heal in approximately 4 minutes. The pain is temporary. The lesson is permanent. What lesson? Mark sobbed. You just hurt me. You broke my arm. No. I demonstrated your durability threshold. You survived an impact that would liquefy a human. Your skeletal structure held. Your organs remained intact. The fracture is minor. Nolan jumped down, landed beside Mark's crater. The pain teaches. The fear makes you sharp. Now pull yourself out and try again. I can't. My arm. Stand. Mark stood on shaking legs. His arm hung limp. He could see the bone shifting under the skin as it healed. The sensation was worse than the break itself. Itching, burning, wrongness. Again. Fly to the ridge. I don't know how. Then learn. Nolan grabbed him by the shirt collar, lifted him, threw him again. This time Mark didn't hit the wall. He flew past it, over it, tumbling through open air above the quarry. The ground spun below him. He was going to die. He was going to hit the rocks and die, and something clicked. Not in his mind, in his body. His spine straightened, his arms found position. The tumbling stopped. He was hovering, actually hovering 30 feet above the quarry floor, held up by nothing but will and genetics and DNA that shouldn't exist in a 10-year-old from Cleveland. He looked down at his father. Nolan was watching, not smiling, not frowning, just watching. Adequate. Now land on the ridge. Mark tried to move forward, lurched, spun, corrected. It was like learning to walk except in 3 dimensions, and if you made a mistake, you fell to your death. He made it to the ridge after 30 seconds of ungainly flight, landed hard, stumbled, caught himself. His arm was completely healed. He flexed his fingers. No pain, like it had never been broken. Again, Nolan said from below. This time faster. Nolan threw Mark into walls, through rock formations, across the quarry floor. Each impact was calculated, hard enough to hurt, not hard enough to cause serious damage. Each time Mark healed. Each time the pain taught him to control his flight a little better, to move a little faster, to brace for impact a little earlier. By hour 3, Mark wasn't crying anymore. The tears had run out. The fear had compressed into something smaller, harder, colder. He did what he was told. Flew when commanded, landed where directed, took the impacts and healed and got up and did it again. Nolan finally called a halt. Sufficient. Your basic flight mechanics are functional. We proceed to Phase 2. Mark stood on the quarry floor, covered in rock dust and dried blood. His clothes were shredded. What's Phase 2? Nolan walked to a duffel bag Mark hadn't noticed before, unzipped it, pulled out a uniform, child-sized, Viltrumite colors, white and red, the same as Nolan's but scaled down. It looked like a toy, a costume, Halloween dress-up. Put it on. Mark took the uniform. The material was wrong. Too light to be fabric, too flexible to be armor. Why? Because today you learn the most important lesson. Today you learn why we are superior. Nolan's voice carried weight. Finality. The guardians of the globe defend this planet. They are Earth's finest warriors. They are insects compared to us. You will watch. You will understand. Mark's stomach dropped. Watch what? Get dressed, Mark. We leave in 5 minutes. The Guardians' headquarters was underground, access through a discreet entrance beneath the Pentagon. Nolan had clearance. Omni-Man, Earth's greatest hero, trusted ally of the U.S. government, and defender of humanity, the security personnel waved them through without question. Mark followed his father through sterile corridors. The uniform fit perfectly. It felt wrong on his body, like wearing someone else's skin. They reached a conference room. Voices inside, casual, friendly, unguarded. Nolan paused at the door, looked down at Mark. Stay behind me, do not speak, do not interfere. Watch everything. He opened the door. The Guardians of the Globe were mid-meeting. Warwoman stood at a holographic display showing satellite imagery of South America. Red Rush was leaning back in his chair, making some joke Mark couldn't hear. Darkwing chuckled. Green Ghost sat in lotus position, floating 6 inches above her seat. eyes closed in meditation. The immortal was reviewing a file. Aquarius was refilling his water glass. Martian Man was listening to War Woman's briefing. They looked up when Nolan entered. Faces broke into smiles. Friendly greetings. Nolan, didn't know you were joining us today? Hey, is that your Nolan? Why is your son dressed like... Nolan moved. War Woman's head separated from her body before she finished speaking. Her body stood for half a second, arterial spray painting the ceiling red. Then it collapsed. The room exploded. Mark stood frozen in the doorway. His brain couldn't process what he was seeing. The man who was his father, who had taught him to ride a bike, who made pancakes on Sundays, was tearing through Earth's greatest heroes like they were paper. Red Rush tried to evacuate. Faster than thought, moving at speeds that left after images, he grabbed Mark, trying to pull him to safety. Kid, close your eyes. I'm getting you out. Red Rush's eyes went wide. Impossible. No one was faster than Red Rush's head. Squeezed, slowly, maintaining eye contact with Mark. Watch, Nolan said. This is mercy compared to what their species deserves. Red Rush's skull compressed. The sounds, wet, crunching, final, would live in Mark's nightmares forever. Nolan held the body for 3 seconds after it stopped twitching, then dropped it. Darkwing threw smoke pellets, the room filled with chemical darkness. Mark heard impacts, screams. The smoke cleared. Darkwing was embedded in the wall, his skull caved in on the right side. His jaw hung loose, broken. 3 teeth lay on the conference table. He wasn't moving. Green Ghost phased through the floor, trying to escape. Nolan punched downward, his fist entering the floor like it was water. There was a muffled scream from below. Nolan pulled his hand back up. Green Ghost's neck was broken, her head twisted 180 degrees. Her incorporeal body had solidified the moment Nolan touched her. She died before understanding how. The immortal fought, actually fought. Millennia of combat experience driving every move. His axe carved through Nolan's shoulder, drawing blood, first blood. The immortal pressed the advantage, head-butted the immortal. The ancient warrior's nose exploded. Nolan grabbed him by the throat and belt, tore him in half. The top half screamed. It kept screaming. The immortal's regeneration was trying to work, trying to knit him back together, failing. Nolan held both pieces, looked at Mark. Apex predators do not mourn prey. Say it. Mark couldn't speak. His mouth was open, but no sound came out. The room smelled like copper and bowels and something chemical from Martian Man's torn body. The floor was painted red. Parts of people lay scattered like broken toys. Say it, Mark. I don't say it. I don't mourn prey. The words came out mechanical, robotic. Mark's brain had disconnected from his mouth to protect itself. Again, I don't mourn prey. Good. Aquarius tried to drown Nolan with manipulated water from the building's sprinkler system. Nolan flew through it, grabbed Aquarius by the face, and carried him straight up, through the ceiling, through the Pentagon, into the sky. Mark could see them through the hole in the ceiling, 2 figures ascending rapidly. Then Nolan released him. Aquarius fell. Mark lost sight of him. Seconds later, a distant crash. Then nothing. Martian Man was the last. The Martian tried telepathy. Mark felt it, a pressure in his skull trying to make him see things. His mother, his old room, birthday parties, normal life, human life. Nolan grabbed Martian Man's throat. Viltrumite minds are trained against telepathy. Your tricks are obsolete, he squeezed. Martian Man's green skin turned purple. His eyes bulged, his neck collapsed. Nolan dropped the body. Turned to Mark. His uniform was torn. Blood covered his hands, his face, his chest. Most of it wasn't his. 7 heroes, 12 minutes. Do you understand what you just witnessed? Mark stared at him, at the bodies, at the red room. You killed them. I neutralized threats. These beings were obstacles to Earth's proper integration into the Viltrumite Empire. They would have resisted. Now they cannot. Nolan walked toward Mark, boots leaving red footprints. You feel sick, weak, confused. This is your human DNA lying to you. They were heroes. They protected people. They were prey pretending to be predators. You are the apex. Apex predators do not mourn prey. Nolan knelt to eye level. His hands, covered in blood, framed Mark's face. Mr. Immortal was nice to you at the carnival. Do you remember? Mark nodded, couldn't speak. He was prey pretending to be a peer. That niceness was camouflage, an evolutionary adaptation to make you lower your guard. It means nothing. He was weak. They were all weak. You are strong. Nolan's thumbs wiped tears from Mark's cheeks. I showed you this early because your brain is still forming. Neuroplasticity. You will process this as normal, as necessary. If I waited until you were 17, your human ethics would have calcified. You would have resisted. This is a gift, Mark. I am saving you from the weakness that would have destroyed you. Mark's legs gave out. Nolan caught him, held him upright. We're going home now. You will not tell your mother what you saw. You will process this alone. Her comfort would poison you. Do you understand? Mark nodded. He understood nothing, but he nodded. They flew home. Nolan carried him this time, not roughly, but not gently either. Functionally, like cargo, they entered through Mark's bedroom window. Nolan set him down. Shower. Your uniform is damaged. There's a replacement in your closet. Dispose of this one. Nolan left through the window, off to establish an alibi, to be somewhere public and heroic when the bodies were discovered. Mark stood alone in his room. His uniform was splattered with blood, not his blood, 7 heroes' blood. He peeled it off with shaking hands. Underneath, his skin was clean, unmarked, like nothing had happened. He walked to the bathroom, started to shower, watched the water run, thought about stepping into it. Instead, he vomited, violently. Nothing came up. He hadn't eaten since yesterday, just dry heaves that left him gasping on the tile floor. When he finally stopped, he crawled into the shower, let the water run over him. The water in the drain was clear. There was no blood to wash off. The blood was all in his head. He stayed in the shower until the hot water ran out, then stayed longer, until he was shivering, until he couldn't feel his fingers. When he got out, he dried off mechanically, put on normal clothes, jeans, t-shirt, found the new uniform in his closet like Nolan said, took the damaged one and stuffed it deep in his trash can under other garbage. He lay in bed, stared at the ceiling. The glow-in-the-dark stars were still there, childish, meaningless. Downstairs, he heard his mother cooking, heard her humming. She didn't know what her son had just witnessed, what her husband had just done. Mark closed his eyes, tried to unsee the red room, couldn't. It was burned into his brain, permanent, forever. He thought, I should cry. Normal people would cry, but no tears came. The crying reflex was already shutting down, already being classified as weakness, as inefficiency, as prey behavior. The human part of Mark was dying. Nolan had killed it in that red room, showed Mark exactly what happened to weakness, to heroism, to hope. Mark lay in bed as the sun set, as the stars came out, as the world kept spinning like nothing had changed, but everything had changed. The red lesson was complete. Age 11. Nevada desert. 2:47 a.m. The GDA bunker was buried 200 feet underground, reinforced concrete and steel, designed to survive nuclear strikes. Mark descended through the ceiling like it was tissue paper. The facility had 47 personnel, night shift, technicians monitoring satellite feeds, scientists analyzing Viltrumite DNA samples taken from old Omni-Man battle sites, soldiers guarding equipment that could theoretically hurt a Viltrumite. Theoretically. Mark landed in the main corridor. Emergency lights painted everything red. Alarms screamed. He'd triggered them on entry. Didn't matter. Stealth wasn't the objective. Compliance through overwhelming force was the objective. A soldier named Hernandez rounded the corner, rifle raised. He saw Mark, 11 years old, 4'6", wearing a Viltrumite uniform that made him look like a child playing dress-up, and hesitated. Kid, listen. We know your dad is controlling you. We can help. Mark moved. His fist went through Hernandez's chest plate, through his sternum, through his heart. The soldier's eyes went wide. He tried to speak. Blood came out instead of words. Mark pulled his fist back. Hernandez collapsed. Mark stepped over him, kept walking. Mercy is a human weakness. Viltrumites don't negotiate. Nolan's voice in his head, always in his head now, teaching, guiding, correcting. The bunker's security tried to seal blast doors. Mark tore through them. The metal screamed as it bent. People screamed louder. Mark's face stayed blank, efficient. He was completing the mission, eliminating threats. The fact that the threats were terrified scientists and under-equipped soldiers was irrelevant data. 37 minutes later, the bunker was silent. Mark stood in the command center, surrounded by bodies. His uniform was destroyed, shredded by gunfire that hadn't penetrated his skin. Blood covered him, his hands, his chest, his face. He looked at the surveillance screens. They were still active, still recording. He stared at his own reflection in one. 11 years old, covered in the blood of 47 people. His eyes were empty. He flew back to the fortress. Dawn was breaking. Nolan was waiting in the training room. Report, equipment salvageable. Nolan walked around Mark, examined him. Your technique is sloppy. You overkilled several targets, wasted energy, inefficient. Yes, father. You didn't hesitate. You didn't retreat. Nolan's hand gripped Mark's shoulder, firm, almost affectionate. I'm proud. It was the only thing that felt like love anymore. Age 12, United Nations headquarters, New York. Mark and Nolan hovered 300 feet above the General Assembly. Below, diplomats and world leaders stared up through the glass ceiling. Some raised phones, recording. Some just stared. Nolan's voice boomed. No microphone needed. This child is more powerful than every military on Earth combined. You have no authority here. Submit or be made irrelevant. The French ambassador stood. You cannot simply... Beijing, Nolan said. Looked at Mark. Demonstrate. Mark flew. Sonic boom. He crossed the Pacific in 8 minutes. Descended over Beijing's military district. Nolan had given specific targets, missile silos, command centers, airfields. No civilian casualties. This was demoralization, not depopulation. Mark worked systematically. Tore through hangars. Crushed fighter jets like soda cans. Punched through reinforced bunkers. The Chinese military fired everything, rockets, bullets, experimental energy weapons. Mark flew through it all, untouched, unstoppable. 40 seconds of destruction. Then he stopped, hovered over the wreckage, waited for the cameras, made sure they got his face, made sure the world saw a 12-year-old boy had just dismantled a military superpower. He flew back to New York. Landed beside Nolan above the UN. The General Assembly was silent now. Any other objections? Nolan asked. Silence. Within 2 months, 90% of Earth's governments had surrendered. The remaining 10% were classified as insurgent territories. Mark handled most of the pacification personally. Nolan said it was good training. Age 14. The Fortress, Washington, D.C. The fortress had been built on the ruins of the old Capitol building. Nolan hadn't bothered preserving the architecture. History was irrelevant. Function was everything. Mark ran patrol routes, standard procedure, high-altitude sweep, descending spiral, ground-level sweep, repeat, looking for resistance activity, unauthorized metahuman signatures, anything requiring correction. His comm crackled. Mark, conference room now. He altered course, landed on the fortress landing pad, entered through the main corridor. The human staff, administrators, technicians, the ones who'd accepted the new order, averted their eyes as he passed. Fear response. Appropriate, Nolan was in the conference room with 3 human officials, a general, a senator, a corporate executive. They stood when Mark entered. Respect through terror. Status? Nolan asked. Patrol complete. No anomalies detected. Chicago sector remains compliant. Good. These officials require escorts to the European reconstruction zones. You'll accompany them. Ensure their safety. Mr. Grayson, with all respect, I don't think we need... Nolan's eyes went cold. The general stopped talking. You need exactly what I tell you that you need. Mark's presence ensures compliance. It reminds people what resistance costs. Nolan looked at Mark. Go. Mark nodded, gestured to the officials. Follow me. Obedient. Mark flew them across the Atlantic at speeds that made them vomit from G-forces. He didn't slow down. Their comfort was irrelevant data. Age 15. Kansas City. Midnight. The resistance cell had ambushed him. 30 soldiers. Experimental weapons designed by Cecil Stedman's underground network. Sonic cannons that disrupted equilibrium. Kinetic weapons that actually hurt. Mark crashed through a building. His shoulder was bleeding. Actual blood. First time in months. The pain cut through his tactical assessments like a knife. Pain means threat. Threats must be eliminated with extreme prejudice. He erupted from the rubble. No technique now, no efficiency, just rage response. Programmed, automatic, unstoppable. The 30 soldiers lasted 40 seconds. When Mark stopped moving, he stood in a crater. Parts of people lay scattered around him. The violence had been excessive, grotesque. One soldier's arm was 200 feet away. Another's head had been driven into the pavement like a nail. Mark looked at his hands. They were shaking, not from exertion, from something else, something trying to surface through the programming. Horror. He crushed it, classified it as weakness, lobbed it for his next debrief with Nolan. Corrections would be made. He flew back to the fortress, reported the mission complete. Minimal structural damage. The fact that he'd killed 30 people in a berserker rage wasn't mentioned. Numbers were just numbers. Nolan gripped his shoulder. You are becoming what you were always meant to be. Didn't feel anything about those words. Didn't feel anything about the bodies in Kansas City. Didn't feel anything. The emptiness was perfect. The emptiness was safe. Age 15. The fortress. Balcony. Sunset. Mark stood alone, watching the sun descend over conquered earth. Below, humans moved through the streets, going to work, going home, living their small, brief, meaningless lives under Viltrumite occupation. Propaganda posters lined the buildings, images of Mark, the boy conqueror, standing victorious over subdued rebels. The imagery was intentional. Submission to a child was the ultimate humiliation, proof that humanity was finished. Mark felt nothing looking at the posters. They were tactical assets, tools for maintaining order. He heard footsteps behind him. Nolan joined him at the railing. 4 years, Nolan said. 4 years since your awakening. Do you remember what you were before? Who loved dinosaurs? Who was terrified of hurting people? That boy felt fictional now. A story someone had told him about someone else. No, father, I don't remember. Nolan smiled. Not the warm dad smile from before. The real smile. Satisfaction. Good. That boy was weak. Contaminated by human ethics. He would have died young, broken by a world he couldn't protect himself from. I saved you from that fate. Thank you, Father. You'll understand fully when you're older, when the Empire sends their inspection fleet, when you meet true Viltrumites, not compromised half-breeds or primitives. Nolan looked at the sunset. The human disease is almost fully eradicated from you. Almost. Mark filed that away. There was still something wrong with him, something weak. Something that needed to be corrected. He would find it, eliminate it, become pure. Inside the fortress, surveillance systems monitored him constantly. Nolan reviewing the feeds, checking for signs of contamination, emotional responses, hesitation, attachment. Mark knew he was being watched. It didn't bother him. Privacy was a human concept, inefficient. The sun set fully. The sky turned from orange to purple to black. Stars emerged, the same stars that had been on his ceiling as a child. When the room had glow-in-the-dark constellations and stuffed dinosaurs and a mother who sang him to sleep, Mark turned away from the balcony, from the sky, from whatever weak part of him was trying to remember being human. He went inside, back to the training room, back to the weights and the combat drills and the constant grinding work of becoming perfect. The human part was almost dead. Soon it would be completely dead. And then Mark Grayson, the boy who'd existed for 10 years, would be fully erased, replaced by the weapon Nolan had always meant him to be. Age 15, the fortress, Debbie's quarters, 7:14 a.m. The artificial sunrise simulation began at precisely 7 a.m. Debbie Grayson had learned to wake before it, lying in darkness, counting down the minutes until light invaded her cell. Cell. That's what it was. The penthouse furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows didn't change that. Neither did the synthesized gourmet meals or the climate control or the entertainment system with every streaming service available. A prison with premium amenities was still a prison. The room's AI spoke in a pleasant female voice. Good morning, Mrs. Grayson. Current temperature is 72 degrees. Your son is scheduled to visit at 14 o'clock hours. Would you like to review today's menu options? No. Debbie's voice was hoarse. She'd been crying again. She cried most nights now. Silently, face pressed into the pillow so the surveillance wouldn't pick it up. She sat up. The bed was California King, memory foam Egyptian cotton sheets. The best money could buy. She would have traded it all for her old double bed in their Cleveland house. The one with the squeaky spring. The one where she'd slept beside a man she thought she knew. The bathroom mirror showed her the truth. 45 years old but looked 50. Gray streaking through her hair. Lines carved deep around her eyes and mouth. 5 years in this cage had aged her a decade. She splashed water on her face, tried to make herself presentable. Mark would visit in 7 hours. He came every week, punctual, efficient, like everything else in his life now. 2 p.m., the visit. The door unsealed with a pneumatic hiss. Mark entered in full uniform, stood at attention. His posture was military perfect, his face was blank. Debbie's heart broke all over again. Every single week. Mark, baby, please, sit down. You don't have to stand like that, not here. I am adequately positioned, Mother. His voice was flat, clinical. This visit is scheduled for 30 minutes. We have 29 minutes 40 seconds remaining. I made cookies. Well, I had the synthesizer make them. Your favorite, chocolate chip. She gestured to the plate on the coffee table. Please, just sit with me. Mark looked at the cookies. Something flickered across his face, too fast for Debbie to identify. Then it was gone. He sat, perched on the edge of the couch like he might need to evacuate at any moment. His hands rested on his knees, formal, distant. Debbie sat beside him. Not too close, she'd learned. If she got too close, he tensed. Fight response barely suppressed. Her own son viewing her as a potential threat. How are you? She asked. The same question she asked every week. Are you eating enough? You look thin. I am adequately nourished, Mother. My metabolic efficiency has increased 40% since last cycle. Body fat percentage is optimal. Muscle density is within expected parameters. Debbie wanted to scream. Mark, do you remember when you were 7? We went to the beach. You built that sandcastle with the moat and the towers. You worked on it for 3 hours. You were so proud. That data is not relevant to current operations. It's not data, it's a memory. It's your life. Our life together. Mark's jaw tightened. Microscopic tell. The past is inefficient to process. Present objectives require focus. She reached out, grabbed his face with both hands, forced him to look at her. His skin was cold under her palms. Mark, listen to me. You are not a weapon, you are my son. I carried you. I raised you. I know you're still in there. Mark's hands came up, gently removed hers from his face. His grip was careful, controlled. He could have crushed her hands without effort. Instead, he just moved them away. You are experiencing a psychological delusion common to human parents. You believe genetic contribution creates permanent emotional obligation. This is incorrect. I am Viltrumite. You were a host. The person you think you knew never existed. The words were Nolan's, exact phrasing, Nolan's voice coming out of Mark's mouth. Debbie shattered. The sob came from somewhere deep. Primal, she collapsed forward, face in her hands, body shaking. 5 years of compressed grief erupting all at once. Mark sat beside her. Uncomfortable, his hands hovered near her shoulders, uncertain. Touching her would indicate emotional connection. Emotional connection was weakness. But not touching her while she cried violated some buried instinct he couldn't quite suppress. Should I summon medical personnel? His voice was strained. The first real emotion she'd heard from him in months. Get out. Debbie's voice was muffled by her hands. Just get out, please. Mark stood, walked to the door, paused. Mother, for the record, your distress will not be included in my debriefing report. The door sealed behind him before Debbie could process what he'd said. He'd concealed information from Nolan, had deliberately omitted her breakdown from his report. That tiny act of mercy, of protection, was the first crack in his programming she'd seen in 5 years. Debbie looked up at the closed door, tears still streaming. But something else now, too. Hope. Dangerous, fragile, probably foolish hope. Month 14 of captivity. The hunger strike. Debbie stopped eating on a Tuesday. Not dramatically, just didn't touch her breakfast, or lunch, or dinner. By Thursday, she was lightheaded. By Saturday, she was weak. By Monday, she couldn't stand without holding furniture. The medical AI's voice had gone from concerned to urgent. Mrs. Grayson, your caloric intake is insufficient. You are entering a state of metabolic crisis. Please consume nutrition immediately. Debbie lay in bed, stared at the ceiling. This was the only power she had left, the only choice that was actually hers. If she couldn't save her son, at least she could stop being a tool for his captivity. The door opened. Not Mark. Nolan, he stood in the doorway, still in uniform, looked at her with clinical assessment. Not anger, not concern, just analysis. You've stopped eating. Yes. Why? Because I'd rather die than continue being your pet. Nolan walked to the bed, sat on the edge. His weight barely depressed the mattress. He was holding most of his mass through flight, she realized. Even sitting down, he was ready to move. If you die, I will tell Mark it was suicide. That you abandoned him because he became too strong for you to love. He will internalize this as proof that human attachment is conditional and worthless. Your death will complete his indoctrination. Nolan's voice was matter-of-fact. Is that what you want? Debbie's breath caught. You're lying. I don't lie. Lies are inefficient. I'm explaining consequences. Nolan stood. Eat, Debbie, or don't. But understand what your choice means for our son. He left. Debbie stared at the ceiling, trapped in the cruelest catch, 22 imaginable. Living hurt, but dying would hurt Mark more. She pressed the call button. I'll eat. The AI's voice was relieved. Excellent, Mrs. Grayson. Preparing nutritional supplementation now. Month 18. The photograph. Mark's visit. Routine. He stood by the window while Debbie tried to make conversation. He responded in monosyllables. The wall between them had never been thicker. Then his eyes fixed on something. The shelf beside her bed, a photograph in a simple frame, Mark, age 7, gap-toothed smile, holding a baseball trophy from his Little League team. He'd been terrible at baseball, had struck out every game. But he'd loved the team, loved his friends, loved the ice cream they'd gotten after every practice. Mark walked to the shelf, picked up the photograph, stared at it. I remember this, he said quietly. Debbie froze, scared to breathe, scared to break whatever moment this was. You remember? I remember the data. The event occurred. We went to Dairy Mart after the championship game. I ordered mint chocolate chip. You ordered vanilla. His fingers traced the frame edge. The touch was gentle, human. I do not experience nostalgia. Something in the way he pronounced nostalgia, like he was trying to convince himself. Debbie stood slowly, moved beside him. First base, you were so excited you forgot to run to second when the next batter hit. You just stood there grinning. Mark's jaw clenched. Inefficient behavior. You were 7, you were happy, that's not inefficient. That's being a child. Mark set the photograph down, carefully. His hand was shaking. Microscopically, but shaking. My scheduled time has expired. I should depart. Mark, goodbye, mother. He left, quickly, like he was fleeing. Debbie sat on her bed, picked up the photograph, held it to her chest. He remembered. Somewhere under the programming and the violence and the 5 years of Nolan's reconditioning, he remembered being 7 years old and happy. It wasn't much, but it was something. That night, Mark's quarters. Mark lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. His room was Spartan, military cot, weapons locker, tactical displays, no decorations, no personal items, nothing that indicated a person lived here instead of a weapon. But in his head, he kept seeing the photograph. The 7-year-old version of himself who didn't know what he'd become, who thought the worst thing in the world was striking out at baseball. He tried to classify it, tried to process it as Nolan had taught him. The past was irrelevant. Nostalgia was weakness. Human emotions were contamination. But his hand kept touching his chest, where his mother had held him. When he was 7, before Nolan tore everything apart, Mark sat up, accessed his personal data logs, found an entry from age 8, a journal entry the school had made him write. My mom is the best. She makes good food, and she helps me with homework, and she's not even mad when I mess up. Dad is strong, but Mom is strong too in a different way. When I grow up, I want to be like both of them. Mark read it 3 times. The handwriting was childish. The grammar was wrong. The sentiment was painfully naive. The person who wrote this was dead. Nolan had killed him in that red room 5 years ago. So why did Mark's chest hurt looking at it? He deleted the entry, purged it from the system. Evidence of weakness needed to be eliminated, but he couldn't delete it from his memory. The next day, the fortress balcony. Mark ran patrol routes. Standard procedure, nothing anomalous detected. He returned to the fortress landing pad, and instead of going inside, he stopped, turned, looked up at the tower where his mother's quarters were located. He could see her window from here, could see her silhouette standing there, looking out, looking at him. For 1 second, maybe less, he raised his hand. A small wave, barely perceptible. Her silhouette moved, waved back. Then Mark turned away, entered the fortress, filed his patrol report. No anomalies. He didn't mention the wave. Debbie's quarters? Sunset. Debbie stood at her window watching Mark fly patrol routes. The same patterns. Every day. Rigid, mechanical. But today he'd looked back, had waved. It was the smallest gesture. Meaningless, probably. An involuntary movement. Muscle memory from a time when he was still her son. But Debbie held on to it anyway. She whispered to the empty room. "I'm still here, baby. When you're ready, I'm still here." The sun set, the city lights came on. Somewhere out there, Mark was flying his patrol route, crushing resistance cells, enforcing compliance, being the weapon his father had made him. But somewhere deeper, buried under 5 years of conditioning, was a 7-year-old boy who remembered being happy, who remembered ice cream and baseball trophies, and a mother who loved him unconditionally. That boy wasn't completely dead yet, and as long as he wasn't dead, there was hope. Dangerous hope. Foolish hope. But hope nonetheless. Cecil Stedman looked like he'd aged 30 years and 7. Deep lines carved into his face, cigarette perpetually burning between his fingers, eyes that had seen too much and slept too little. The bunker was his 4th this month. They relocated every week now, staying ahead of Mark's patrol patterns, staying alive. "We've got a window," Donald Ferguson said, spreading satellite imagery across the holographic display. Nolan's off-world, Empire business. Mark's running solo patrols. 48 hours, maybe less. Cecil studied the images. Mark's flight patterns were mathematical, predictable. The boy had been trained too well. Efficiency over adaptability. It was the only weakness they had left to exploit. "What's the target?" The voice came from the corner. Female, young, sharp. Samantha Wilkins stood in the shadows. 17 years old. Pink hair, punk aesthetic, eyes that had forgotten how to be soft. She wore a tactical vest over a tank top, fingerless gloves, boots that had seen combat. The matter manipulation powers had manifested at 13. The rage had manifested earlier. Everyone called her Eve now. Her real name belonged to a girl who died with her parents. Supply depot, Atlanta ruins. Cecil pointed to the map. Nolan's forces depend on it for equipment distribution. We take it out, we disrupt their supply chain for 3 months. And Mark comes running, Eve said. Not a question, an observation. Yes, we're not killing a 17-year-old. Eve's voice was flat, final. Cecil met her eyes. We're killing a weapon, one that slaughtered thousands. He's a kid. He stopped being a kid at 10. Cecil's cigarette burned down to the filter. He stubbed it out. Lit another. You don't have to come, Eve. Robot can handle the tech side. I didn't say I wasn't coming. I said we're not killing him. Eve walked to the display, studied Mark's patrol patterns. We wound him. Send a message. Earth still fights, but we don't execute children, even if they're wearing the wrong uniform. Donald looked at Cecil. Cecil looked at the ceiling, calculating, weighing options. Fine, wound him. Make it count. But if he's about to kill one of us, you put him down. Understood? Atlanta ruins. 2:34 a.m. The trap. The depot sat in what used to be downtown. 7 years ago, this had been a business district. Glass towers, corporate headquarters, millions of people moving through their daily lives. Now it was rubble. The towers had been reduced to skeletal frames. Vegetation had reclaimed the streets. Nature devouring civilization. Eve worked methodically, restructuring matter at the molecular level, turning support beams into explosives, concrete into shaped charges. The building itself would become the weapon. Robots' drones circled overhead, 12 units armed with sonic cannons. Rudy Connor's genius packed into mechanical bodies. His real body was somewhere safe, paralyzed, connected to the machines through neural interface. Robot's voice crackled through the comm. Charges set. Proximity sensors active. When Mark enters the building, he'll have approximately 3 seconds before. The sensors shouldn't have triggered yet. Mark descended through the smoke. No warning, no approach vector. He'd been faster than their intel predicted. Was already inside before the trap was fully set. His face was blank. 17 years old, but his eyes were ancient. Dead. He landed in the center of the ruins, uniform pristine against the ash and fire. Unauthorized destruction of Imperial assets. Category 3 offense. Lethal response authorized. His voice was mechanical, scripted. The words of a weapon, not a person. Eve restructured the ground beneath him, concrete to quicksand. He sank. She reinforced it, quicksand to hardened polymer, trapping him, Mark looked down, looked at her. Something flickered in his eyes. Calculation. Assessment. He erupted from the ground like a missile. The polymer shattered. Eve barely dodged. He was already moving to his next target, robots' drones. Mark moved through them like a choreographed dance. Each drone lasted seconds. Sonic cannons fired. Mark's equilibrium disrupted briefly. He compensated, adjusted. Continued 12 drones became scrap metal in 40 seconds. Monster Girl charged in her transformed state. 8 feet of armored muscle and rage. Her fist connected with Mark's jaw. Actual impact. His head snapped sideways. Mark's hand shot out, caught her return punch, twisted. Her arm broke with a wet snap. She roared. He backhanded her casually. She crashed through the remains of a building, unconscious before she hit the ground. Eve was alone now. The plan had lasted 90 seconds. She restructured matter desperately. Barriers, spikes, nets. Mark flew through everything, not toying, just efficient. Threat assessment said she was Category 3, dangerous but manageable. He was managing her. His hand closed around her throat, lifted her, slammed her into a wall. The impact should have killed her. She'd phased her spine to rubber at the last microsecond. Saved herself. Mark's hand was around her throat again. Optimal pressure, enough to render unconscious, not enough to crush windpipe. Prisoners had intelligence value. Cores didn't. Eve stared up at him. She was bleeding from her temple. Vision blurred, but she wasn't scared, just angry. Do it. Prove your dad right. Prove you're exactly the monster he made you. But he spoke. First words of the engagement beyond scripted threat assessment. I am not a monster. I am efficient. You're 17 years old and you've killed more people than cancer. You're a child wearing a uniform covered in our blood. If that's not a monster, what the fuck is? Something flickered in Mark's eyes. Pain? Confusion? The grip on her throat trembled. Microscopically, Eve felt it. You don't understand. This is necessary. This is order. This is... His breathing changed, became irregular, panicked. Eve pushed harder. You know what I remember about being 10? I remember playing with friends. I remember birthday parties. I remember being a kid. What do you remember about being 10, Mark? Mark's eyes went wide. The name hit him like a physical blow, not the weapon, or the hybrid, or the boy conqueror. His name, his actual name. I remember, his voice cracked. I remember. The memory hit him. Schoolyard, Tyler Morrison, the screaming, the blood on his hand that wasn't his blood, and then the red room, the guardians, his father's bloody hands framing his face. Apex predators do not mourn prey. Say it. Mark's hand released. He stepped back. Eve collapsed against the wall, gasping. Mark's face was blank, but his breathing was all wrong. Fast, shallow. Panic response. His hands were shaking. I remember, Tyler. The playground. I didn't mean to. He looked at his hands. And then, Dad, he made me watch. You were 10. He made you watch. That's not training. That's abuse. Stop talking. Mark's voice was breaking apart. 7 years of programming fracturing under a single sustained assault. You're not Viltrumite. You're half human. That matters. The part of you that's hesitating right now, that's the part he tried to kill. But it's still there. No report. Just vertical ascent at maximum velocity until he disappeared into the clouds. Eve slid down the wall, breathing hard. Her comm crackled. Eve, report. What happened? I don't know, but I saw something. He's still in there. The fortress. Mark's quarters. 4:16 a.m. Mark stood in his room, hands shaking, uniform torn, mission incomplete. Failure, catastrophic failure. His tactical processor screamed at him, return to target, complete mission, eliminate witnesses, report to command. But he couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't breathe right. When's the last time you had a thought your dad didn't put there? Mark walked to his footlocker, the only personal storage he had. Inside, weapons, spare uniforms, tactical gear. And at the bottom, wrapped in cloth, buried under everything else, a photograph. He unwrapped it with shaking hands. Mark, age 7. Gap-toothed smile, standing between Debbie and Nolan at a park. Summer day. Ice cream cones. The 3 of them looking happy, looking like a family. Mark touched the photograph. His fingers left sweat marks on the glass. He was crying. Actual tears. falling without permission, weakness manifesting physically. He tried to stop. Couldn't. The tears kept coming, 7 years of suppressed grief forcing its way out. I remember playing with friends. I remember birthday parties. I remember being a kid. Mark remembered. Tried not to. Failed. Remembered building Lego cities with Tyler Morrison, playing tag at recess. His mom singing him to sleep. His dad, before teaching him to ride a bike. Ice cream on summer days. Stuffed dinosaurs. Glow-in-the-dark stars. Remembered being human. The sobs came hard. Ugly. Broken. Mark collapsed against his bed, photograph clutched to his chest, crying for the first time in 7 years. He immediately stopped himself, forced the tears down, logged the emotional breach in his mental report. This would require correction, self-punishment, 50 hours of combat drills, no sleep, no food, purge the weakness. But the crack was there now. Eve had opened it. One conversation, one use of his actual name, one reminder that he used to be a person. Mark stood, wiped his face, put the photograph back in the footlocker, buried it again. He changed into a clean uniform, prepared to file his mission report. Mission failure. First mission failure in 5 years? Nolan would be disappointed. No, not disappointed. Concerned. Concerned about contamination, about human disease resurfacing, about Mark becoming unreliable. Mark's hands were still shaking. He looked at himself in the mirror, 17 years old. Looked older, eyes that had seen too much death, face that had forgotten how to smile, uniform that marked him as conqueror, not protector. You're a child wearing a uniform covered in our blood. When's the last time you had a thought your dad didn't put there? He tried to remember, tried to find one thought, one feeling, one choice that was purely his own, not Nolan's programming, not mission parameters, not tactical assessment, just him. He couldn't find one. 7 years of being Nolan's weapon, 7 years of following orders, 7 years of having every thought, every emotion, every impulse corrected and redirected and reshaped. Who was Mark Grayson without Nolan's voice in his head? He didn't know. The question terrified him more than any combat situation he'd faced. Mark opened the footlocker again, looked at the photograph, at the 7-year-old who smiled like he didn't have a care in the world. Who were you? He whispered to his younger self. Who was I supposed to be? The photograph didn't answer. Dead things never did. But somewhere, buried deep, under 7 years of conditioning and violence and death, something stirred, something that still remembered ice cream and dinosaurs and a mother who sang lullabies, something that refused to be completely dead. Age 17, 2 weeks post-Atlanta, Patrol Route 7, 6:42 p.m. Mark flew his standard pattern. Chicago sector, high-altitude sweep, descending spiral, ground-level assessment. The routine was mathematical. Precise. He'd flown this exact route 847 times. His efficiency rating had dropped to 87%, down from 99.2%. The deviation was logged, analyzed. Concerning. He couldn't stop thinking about Atlanta. When's the last time you had a thought your dad didn't put there? He'd tried to excise it through combat drills, through sleep deprivation, through tactical assessment exercises. Nothing worked. The question remained. Mark descended over Navy Pier, scanned for anomalies, found none. Continued pattern. His comm was silent. Nolan was still off-world. Empire business. Mark was operating independently. No oversight. No immediate supervision. For the first time in 7 years, he was alone with his thoughts. The realization was terrifying. The Fortress, Strategy Room, 11:23 p.m. Mark entered without knocking. Nolan stood at the holographic display, reviewing star charts. Planning, always planning. He turned when Mark entered. His face showed neither pleasure nor displeasure, just assessment, reading Mark's body language, posture, micro-expressions. Report, Nolan said. Patrol complete. No anomalies detected. Chicago sector remains compliant. Your efficiency rating has declined. Nolan had reviewed the data, had noticed the deviation. Of course he had. Acknowledged, Father. I am implementing corrective measures. Nolan studied him. Silent, measuring. Is there something else? Mark hesitated. The hesitation was itself a tell. Weakness. But the question was already forming. Had been forming for 2 weeks. Couldn't be suppressed anymore. Father, I have a question. Nolan's expression shifted, minutely. Interest, concern. Questions indicated cognitive engagement, but the wrong type of engagement could indicate contamination. Proceed. The resistance engages despite zero probability of victory. This is irrational. But humans are not unintelligent. Irrationality suggests missing data in our assessment. What do they believe they are protecting? The question hung in the air. Nolan was silent for 5 seconds. Processing, evaluating. They protect a delusion. They believe their species has intrinsic value. They are wrong. Value is measured by power. They have none. Thus, they have no value to themselves. Is not self-determination a form of power? Danger bells. Nolan's posture shifted. Imperceptibly, combat ready. Where is this coming from? Mark's throat was dry. I encountered the meta-designated Adam Eve. She presented an argument I could not logically refute. She claimed, "What?" Nolan's voice dropped 20 degrees. She claimed I am following programming instead of logic, that my thoughts are not my own. Silence. The strategy room's environmental systems hummed. Outside, the city moved through its controlled routines. Inside, father and son stood across from each other, predator and prey. Nolan's face didn't change, but Mark knew that expression, had known it since age 10, the one from the quarry, the one that preceded pain. Come with me. We're going to spar. The quarry, the same quarry from 7 years ago. Midnight. Nolan landed hard. Impact craters. Mark landed lighter, uncertain. He'd been here before. The first day, the day his childhood ended. Defend yourself. Father, I don't understand what... Nolan's fist hit Mark's solar plexus. Full force. No holding back. Mark flew backward through 3 rock formations. Each impact shattered stone, shattered ribs. Mark coughed blood. He hadn't been hit like this in years. Nolan didn't spar at full strength anymore. Mark had been trusted, reliable. Not anymore. Get up. Mark stood. His ribs were knitting back together, healing. But slowly, too slowly, did I do something wrong? You allowed an inferior being to infect your cognition. That is not wrong. That is catastrophic. You are compromised. Nolan attacked again. Combination strikes, brutal, efficient, designed to break bones and crush organs. Mark tried to defend, block, counter. But Nolan was faster, stronger, 2,000 years of combat experience against 17 years. Mark's jaw dislocated. His left arm broke. Nolan grabbed the broken arm, twisted, used it as leverage, threw Mark into the quarry wall. The impact created a crater 20 feet deep. Between blows, Nolan spoke. Do you know why I kept your mother alive? To see if human attachment would resurface. It did. You concealed Eve's words from me, you concealed tears. You are rotting from the inside with human disease. Mark pulled himself from the crater, bleeding, damaged. I'm loyal. I've completed every mission. Loyalty is not compliance. Loyalty is absence of doubt. You doubt, therefore you are not Viltrumite. Nolan pinned Mark to the ground, fist raised. Mark stared up at his father, the man who had broken him at 10, who had spent 7 years rebuilding him as a weapon. Mark's vision was blurred, blood in his eyes, ribs grinding against each other. He stared up at Nolan and saw, not a commander, not a mentor, a tyrant. The realization hit harder than any punch. Say it. Say the human part of you is weakness. Mark hesitated. 1 second. That's all. But it was enough. Nolan's fist crashed down. Mark's consciousness flickered. Mark's quarters. 3:47 a.m. Mark woke in his bed, body screaming, healing. Nolan sat beside the bed. The shift from violence to gentleness was more terrifying than the beating itself. My son, I did not want to hurt you, but you were infected, and infection spreads. I have purged it. Do you understand? Mark's voice was hollow. I understand. Good. Nolan leaned forward, gentle, paternal. The mask back in place. The Empire is sending an inspection fleet. Agent Anissa will arrive in 3 weeks. She will evaluate Earth's subjugation. If she finds weakness, in infrastructure, in resistance activity, or in you, she will recommend Earth's population be culled. Do you understand what that means? Billions dead. Your doubts, your human disease, will not just kill you, it will kill every human on this planet, including your mother. Nolan's hand rested on Mark's shoulder, light, almost affectionate. So I need to know, are you Viltrumite or are you human? The question was a trap. Both answers led to death. But one death was immediate. The other was delayed. Mark met his father's eyes, spoke the words that would save his life. I am Viltrumite. Genuine, relieved, good. Rest, heal. We have much to prepare. He left. Mark lay alone in his bed. His body was healing, his bones knitting, his organs repairing. But something else was breaking. Something that couldn't be healed through Viltrumite physiology. His certainty. For 7 years, Mark had been certain of his purpose, certain of his identity, certain that Nolan was right and humanity was wrong. The certainty had been armor, protection against doubt and fear and grief. Eve had cracked the armor, Nolan had shattered it, and now Mark lay in the wreckage, uncertain of everything. 3 hours later, 6:52 a.m., Mark stood at his sink, stared at his reflection. The bruises were gone. The broken bones healed. Physically, he was perfect. Mentally, he was fragmenting. He opened the footlocker, pulled out the photograph. Mark, age 7, smiling between his parents. He stared at the gap-toothed child. That boy had been real, had been happy, had been human. Nolan had killed that boy in a red room 7 years ago. Or had he? Eve's words echoed. The part of you that's hesitating right now, that's the part he tried to kill, but it's still there. Mark touched the photograph. His hands, the same hands that had shattered Tyler's arm, that had killed 47 people in a Nevada bunker, that had torn through countless resistance fighters, were shaking. When's the last time you had a thought your dad didn't put there? Mark tried to answer, tried to find one thought that was purely his own. He found one. I don't want to kill my mother. The thought was quiet, small, but it was his, not Nolan's programming, not mission parameters, not tactical assessment, just a simple human desire to not hurt the woman who had carried him for 9 months. Mark stared at the photograph, at the 7-year-old who didn't know what he'd become, who thought the worst thing in the world was striking out at baseball. That child was dead. Nolan had made sure of it. But something of him remained. Some fragment, some ghost, some tiny piece that still remembered ice cream and dinosaurs and a mother's lullabies. Mark made a decision, the first real decision he'd made in 7 years. He would meet with Eve again. He would listen. He would risk everything. But first, he would play Viltrumite, because if Nolan suspected rebellion before Mark was ready, Earth died, his mother died, and the last human part of him died with them. The game had begun. Mark against Nolan, son against father, weapon against weaponsmith. Mark had no idea if he could win, had no idea if winning was even possible. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty: he couldn't keep living as Nolan's puppet. 7 years of programming, 7 years of conditioning, 7 years of being perfect and obedient and efficient. It ended now, even if ending it killed him. That evening, the fortress balcony, 7:34 p.m., Mark stood alone watching the sunset. The same sunset he'd watched 1,000 times, but different now. Everything was different now. Behind him, footsteps. Nolan joined him at the railing. How do you feel? Operational, father, ready for Anissa's inspection. Good. Nolan was silent for a moment. Mark, I need you to understand something. What I did in the quarry, it was necessary. The human disease spreads like cancer. If I don't cut it out, it kills you. Kills everything you could be. I understand, father. Do you? Because I need you to truly understand. In 3 weeks, Anissa will test you. If you show weakness, she won't correct you. She'll execute you, and then she'll execute your mother. And then she'll recommend Earth's population be reduced to manageable levels. Billions will die because my son couldn't control his human emotions. Left dents in the metal. I won't fail you, father. I know you won't. Because you're my son, my greatest achievement, the perfect synthesis of Viltrumite power and human adaptability. Nolan's hand rested on Mark's shoulder. You are what I always hoped you'd be. Mark nodded, didn't trust his voice. Nolan left. Mark stood alone, staring at the sunset, at the dents his hands had left in the railing. You are what I always hoped you'd be. But what if Mark didn't want to be that? What if he wanted to be something else? Someone else? What if he wanted to be the 7-year-old with the gap-toothed smile? Mark closed his eyes, made plans. Dangerous plans, suicidal plans. But plans nonetheless. In 3 weeks, Anissa would arrive, would test his loyalty, would try to make him prove his Viltrumite purity by killing everything human he had left. Mark would have to make a choice. The final choice, the only choice that mattered. Viltrumite or human, weapon or person. His father's son or his mother's son. Mark opened his eyes, stared at the sunset, at Earth, at the planet he'd helped conquer, the planet he'd terrorized for 7 years, the planet he might die protecting. The choice was made, had been made the moment Eve asked that question. The moment Mark realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd had a thought Nolan didn't put there. But Nolan couldn't know. Not yet. Not until Mark was ready. So Mark would play the perfect weapon, would complete his missions, would pass Anissa's preliminary tests, would be everything Nolan wanted him to be. Until the moment came to be something else, the game had begun. And Mark was terrified he had no idea how to play. Age 18. 3 weeks later, the Fortress landing pad, 2:17 p.m., the Viltrumite ship didn't land gently. It punctured Earth's atmosphere like a bullet, friction heating its hull to plasma temperatures. No deceleration, no concern for human infrastructure. It impacted the Pacific Ocean at terminal velocity. The resulting tsunami killed 4,000 people. Coastal cities obliterated. The message was clear. Viltrumites don't care about human casualties. Mark watched the satellite feed from the strategy room, watched the wave consume buildings, watched people try to run, watched them fail. His face stayed blank. Nolan watched him watching, looking for cracks, looking for human empathy, finding none. She's here, Nolan said. Remember what we discussed. No weakness, no hesitation. Your survival depends on it. I understand, Father, but Mark didn't understand. Couldn't reconcile the math. 4,000 people dead as a greeting, as a statement of power, as casual as a handshake. You're a child wearing a uniform covered in our blood. Eve's words echoed. Mark silenced them. Had to silence them. Had to be perfect for the next 72 hours or everyone died. The fortress courtyard, 3:45 p.m. First contact, Agent Anissa emerged from the Pacific walking on water. Not flying, walking. Demonstrating control. Demonstrating power. The ocean parted around her feet with each step. She was tall, battle-scarred, white hair pulled back in a warrior's braid. 800 years old but appeared 30. Her uniform was pristine Viltrumite military. No concessions to Earth aesthetics. No pretense of being anything but conqueror. Nolan met her at the courtyard entrance. They embraced, warriors not friends, fists to shoulders, respect through violence. Nolan, your reports claim full planetary pacification. I'm here to verify. Resistance is minimal. Human governments operate under imperial oversight. And the hybrid? Anissa's eyes found Mark, standing at attention 10 paces behind Nolan. Is this the genetic experiment? My son, Mark? Anissa walked around Mark like inspecting livestock, examined his posture, his uniform, his eyes, looking for weakness, looking for human contamination. He's small, fully functional Viltrumite capabilities. Capabilities are not loyalty. She stopped in front of Mark, stared into his eyes. Half human, half by genetics, Viltrumite by training and indoctrination. The Empire does not trust half-breeds. Too much human empathy. Empathy is cancer. Her hand shot out, grabbed Mark's jaw, forced his head up. Has he been contaminated? Nolan didn't hesitate. No. Anissa smiled. The expression held no warmth. Then you won't object, the loyalty test. The strategy room, 4:23 p.m. The test parameters. Anissa laid out the requirements with clinical precision. No emotion, no mercy. Just Empire protocol. Test 1. Public execution. We've infiltrated the resistance. Multiple leadership figures are in custody. The hybrid will execute them in a public square, broadcast globally, demonstration of loyalty and power. Mark's hands clenched behind his back. Nolan shot him a warning glance. Test 2. Personal execution. The human female, your breeding partner, represents the hybrid's last human attachment. He will terminate her. Privately, proof of severed emotional ties. Debbie. They wanted him to kill Debbie. Mark's tactical processor flooded with error messages. Mission parameters, impossible. Conflicting directives. System failure imminent. Complete both tests within 72 hours. Prove Viltrumite purity. Fail either test, and I recommend Earth's population be reduced to 500 million for easier management. Understood? Nolan's voice was stone. He will comply. Hour 1, Nolan's briefing. Private conference room. The door sealed. Nolan turned to Mark. His expression was unreadable. I know what you're thinking. You think I'm cruel. I am not. I am saving you. If you show weakness in front of Anissa, she will execute you and request a new hybrid from Empire genetic banks. You will die, Debbie will die, and Earth will be culled. Complete the test. Survive. We will rebuild after Anissa leaves. And if I refuse, Nolan's hand was on Mark's throat instantly. Not squeezing, resting. The threat implicit. You will not refuse. You are my son. You are Viltrumite. You will do what is necessary. Mark forced his voice steady. I understand. Nolan released him. Good. You have 72 hours. Prepare yourself. The executions will be broadcast globally. Every human will watch. Every human will understand. Resistance is death. Compliance is survival. You are the instrument of that message. Yes, Father. At his reflection in the polished surface, he looked like Nolan, same uniform, same posture, same dead eyes. But he wasn't Nolan, not completely, not yet. Eve had made sure of that. Hour 12, Atlanta ruins. 2:34 a.m., the secret meeting. Mark flew in dark, no lights, no comm traffic staying below Anissa's sensor range. He'd learned her patrol patterns, found the gaps. Eve was waiting, standing in the same ruins where they'd fought 2 weeks ago. Robots' drones circled overhead. Cecil stood in the shadows, cigarette glowing. Eve spoke first. You called me here. Why? Maintained distance. I need you to understand something. In 60 hours, I'm supposed to kill you, Cecil, and my mother. I'm supposed to broadcast it to prove I'm loyal. Eve's face hardened. And you're telling me this because I'm not going to do it. I'm going to fake your deaths, break you out, and fight Nolan and Anissa. Eve stared. That's suicide. Yes. Why? Mark met her eyes. Because you were right, I am not my programming, and if I kill the only people who still see me as human, then the 10-year-old boy who died in that quarry will never come back. I'd rather die human than live Viltrumite. Kid, you're talking about starting a war you can't win. Anissa and Nolan together? They'll kill you in seconds. Probably, but I'm done being his weapon. Eve's expression shifted, softened. You're serious. I'm terrified, but yes. Mark pulled a data chip from his uniform, fortress schematics, security protocols, Anissa's patrol patterns, everything I know. If I fail, use it. Keep fighting. Eve took the chip. Mark, I don't want to hear that I'm brave or that I'm doing the right thing. I've killed thousands of people. I've been a monster for 7 years. This doesn't erase that. This doesn't fix anything. His voice cracked. But maybe it's a start. Cecil looked at Eve. Eve looked at Mark. Robots' drones hovered, silent witnesses. What do you need from us? Eve asked. Stay alive. When the execution happens, I'll create an opening. Run, hide, live. Mark turned to leave, stopped. And Eve, thank you for reminding me I used to be human. He flew away before she could respond. Hour 36. Debbie's quarters, 4:17 a.m. Unscheduled visit, the door unsealed. Debbie woke instantly. Survival instinct. She'd learned to sleep light. Mark stood in her doorway, out of uniform, wearing civilian clothes, jeans, t-shirt. She hadn't seen him in civilian clothes in 7 years. Mark? Baby, what's wrong? He crossed the room quickly, knelt beside her bed, spoke fast, quietly. Mom, I don't have time. In 36 hours, I'm supposed to kill you. I'm not going to. I'm going to break you out. But I need you to trust me. When the time comes, don't fight me. Play dead. Can you do that? Debbie's eyes filled with tears. She touched his face, first real touch in years. Mark, baby, you're back. I don't know what I am, but I know I'm not killing you. What about Nolan? I'm going to fight him. He'll kill you. Maybe, but I'm done being his weapon. Mark's hands were shaking. Mom, I'm so sorry for everything, for what I did, what I said. Debbie pulled him into a hug. Mark stiffened. Contact equals weakness, then melted. He was 18 years old and hadn't been hugged in 8 years. He broke. The sobs came hard, ugly. 8 years of compressed grief erupting. Debbie held him, stroked his hair, whispered the things mothers whispered to broken children. Shh, baby, you were 10. He broke you, but you're putting yourself back together. That's all that matters. I killed people, Mom. So many people, I remember their faces. I know, baby, I know, but you're choosing differently now. That's what counts. They stayed like that for 5 minutes. Mother and son. Human connection. The thing Nolan had tried to kill. Mark pulled away. Wiped his eyes. I have to go. If he finds out I was here, I'll be ready. When the time comes, I trust you. Mark nodded, started to leave, turned back. Mom, I love you. The words felt foreign. Rusty, like a language he'd forgotten how to speak. But true. I love you too, baby. Come back to me. Hour 60. Mark's quarters, 10:52 p.m., the letter. Mark sat at his desk, paper and pen, nothing electronic, nothing traceable. He wrote in careful script. I am 18 years old. I have killed 2,847 people. I remember their faces. I remember telling myself I felt nothing. I was lying. I felt everything. I buried it. Tomorrow, I stop burying. Tomorrow, I am either Mark Grayson, human, or I am dead. Both are better than being Viltrumite. If you find this, no. I tried. I'm sorry I didn't try sooner. He folded the letter, placed it in the footlocker with the photograph. If he died tomorrow, maybe someone would find it. Maybe they'd know he was real. Mark changed into his uniform, full Viltrumite colors, white and red, Conqueror's uniform. He stared at himself in the mirror. Tomorrow, he betrayed everything this uniform represented. Tomorrow, he chose humanity over empire. Tomorrow, he probably died. Mark was terrified. But for the first time in 8 years, the fear felt clean, not programmed, not tactical. Just human fear of human death. He could live with that, or die with that. Either way, it was his choice. Hour 72, public square, dawn, the execution. The square was packed, humans forced to attend under threat. Cameras everywhere, global broadcast. The world would watch. Cecil, Donald, and 5 resistance members were chained to posts. Eve was hooded. She'd volunteered. If Mark's plan failed, she wanted to die fighting. Anissa watched from a balcony. Nolan stood beside Mark on the platform. The crowd was silent, terrified, waiting. Anissa's voice boomed across the square. Mark of Earth, prove your loyalty. Execute the traitors. Mark stepped forward, his heart hammered. Every instinct screamed at him to comply. 8 years of conditioning versus 1 moment of choice. He looked at Cecil. Cecil nodded infinitesimally. Do what you have to do, kid. Mark raised his fist. The world held its breath, and Mark made his choice. His fist didn't hit Cecil. It hit the ground. The impact was seismic. The square shattered. Pavement exploded. Smoke and debris erupted in a massive cloud. Chaos. In the chaos, Mark moved at full speed, grabbed Cecil, Eve, the others, broke their chains with bare hands, whispered, "Fly, hide, live." He threw them, not fatally but hard enough to launch them miles away from ground zero. Out of Anissa's immediate range, the smoke cleared. The posts were empty. The prisoners were gone. Mark stood in the crater, uniform torn, facing Nolan and Anissa. Anissa's voice was death, contaminated. Nolan's face was unreadable. Then, "I'll handle this." Mark met his father's eyes, saw Nolan weighing options, weighing his son against the Empire. "No," Mark said. His voice was steady, clear. "You won't." Anissa moved to pursue. Nolan stopped her with a hand. "He's mine. I will correct this. Give me 1 hour. If you fail, I execute you both, and recommend total planetary purge. 1 hour. He flew after Mark, not at full speed, giving Mark a head start. Psychological warfare. Make Mark run. Make him feel like prey. But Mark wasn't running to escape. He was running to prepare. The war had begun. Desert wasteland, 50 miles from the fortress. 6:47 a.m. Mark landed in the middle of nowhere. Salt flats stretching to the horizon. No cover, no civilians, just empty earth and open sky. He waited. Nolan arrived within minutes, descended slowly, deliberately. Every movement calculated to maximize psychological pressure. He landed 50 feet away. Father and son faced each other, commander and defector, Viltrumite and hybrid. The sun was rising behind Nolan. Mark had to squint to see his father's face. Even now, Nolan maintained tactical advantage. Mark. Nolan's voice was calm, disappointed. You've made a mistake. A catastrophic one, but it can be corrected. No, it can't. Nolan took a step forward. Kill Debbie. Tell Anissa the resistance escaped, but you'll hunt them down. We can still salvage this. You can still survive as your weapon anymore. You don't know what you want. You're confused, contaminated. The human disease has resurfaced. I can purge it again. We've done this before. Mark's fists clenched. You mean you can beat it out of me again? Break my bones until I comply, until I forget I'm human, if necessary. No hesitation, no shame, just pragmatism. Mark laughed, bitter, broken. You really don't see it, do you? You really think this is helping me? I saved you, Nolan's voice cracked. First real emotion. I could have let you live as a human, weak, pathetic, dead before your 80th birthday. I gave you millennia. I gave you power. And you spit on it for what? For a woman who will die in 40 years? For a planet of insects? For a chance to be something other than you? Nolan attacked. The first exchange. 6:49 a.m., Nolan's fist connected with Mark's jaw. The force was apocalyptic. Mark flew backward through the air, tumbling no control. He crashed into the desert floor a quarter-mile away, cratered, dust cloud. He pulled himself up, tasted blood. His jaw was broken, already healing but slowly. Nolan was already there, had crossed the distance in seconds, grabbed Mark by the throat, lifted him. I made you powerful. Mark's hands grabbed Nolan's wrist, tried to break the grip, failed. You made me a murderer. You were going to be nothing. Mark's ribs shattered, spine fractured. He gasped, couldn't breathe, lungs compressed. Nolan descended into the crater. I am your father. I made you. You owe me everything. Mark spat blood, laughed bitterly. You made me know. You broke me. You took a kid and turned him into a weapon. That's not fatherhood. That's ownership. Nolan reached down, grabbed Mark by the hair, pulled him up to eye level, their faces inches apart. If I wanted to own you, I would have killed Debbie 8 years ago. I kept her alive for you. You dangled her like bait. And it worked. I killed for you. I destroyed for you. I buried every human part of myself for you. And it still wasn't enough. Mark's voice cracked. You still beat me. You still call me contaminated. Because you are. You let a human meta fill your head with poison. You chose them over me. Mark's hands grabbed Nolan's face. Fingers digging in. No, I chose myself over you. The turning point. 6:53 a.m. Something in Nolan cracked. Not much. A hairline fracture. He released Mark, stepped back, ran a hand through his hair. Mark, son, listen to me. We can fix this. Kill Debbie. Tell Anissa you had to maintain cover. That killing her in private was strategic. We can still. She's a human who happened to birth you. Gens are not love. Mark stood, shaking, bleeding. You're right. Genes aren't love, which is why you were never my father. Nolan's face went blank. Frozen, Mark continued. A father protects. A father nurtures. A father doesn't force his 10-year-old to watch him massacre people. You're not my father. You're my warden, and I'm done serving my sentence. You ungrateful, Nolan couldn't finish. Rage choked him. I gave you everything. Power, purpose, millennia of life, and you throw it away for what? For sentiment, for weakness, for a chance to be human, for a chance to be something better than what you made me. Nolan stared, recalculated. You really believe that? You really think you can be human? I'm going to try. Then you'll die human. Nolan attacked again, this time not to teach, to kill. The real fight. 6:58 a.m. Mark didn't run, didn't defend. He flew directly at Nolan. Head-on collision, the shockwave flattened the desert for a mile in every direction. They grappled, broke apart, collided again. Mark was weaker, slower, less experienced, but Mark had something Nolan didn't. Nothing left to lose. Mark fought like a berserker. No technique, just rage. 8 years of buried rage. Every punch was for the 10-year-old who watched his heroes die. Every kick was for the 12-year-old who became a killer. Every headbutt was for the 17-year-old who forgot how to cry. Nolan's arm broke. First real damage Mark had ever inflicted on his father. Nolan's eyes widened, shocked. How did you? Kept attacking. Pain didn't matter, death didn't matter. Only this mattered, only choosing humanity over empire. They separated, both bleeding, both damaged. Nolan's arm hung wrong. Mark's face was a mask of blood. Nolan stared at his broken arm, then at Mark. I can't let you live. Anissa will kill me if I don't bring your corpse. Then you'll have to kill me. I will. I know. They didn't move. Staring, father and son, both broken, both bleeding, both knowing this ended in death. Mark's calm crackled. Eve's voice, Mark, Cecil's got a plan. We've got one shot, but we need you now. This isn't over. No, it isn't. Mark flew away. Vertical ascent. Maximum speed. Gone. Nolan stood alone in the ruined desert, staring at his broken arm. At the blood on his hands, his own blood. First time Mark had made him bleed in combat. He thought, I lost him. I don't know when, but I lost him. Then he followed, because he had no choice. The fortress. Debbie's quarters. 7:12 a.m. Mark crashed through the window. Alarms screaming. Debbie was awake, waiting. She'd heard the explosions. Mark, what happened? No time. We're leaving. Now. He ripped the door off its hinges, grabbed Debbie, started to fly out. Anissa intercepted them. Fast. Impossibly fast. She pinned Mark against the wall, hand on his throat. Debbie flew from his arms, hit the ground hard. I gave Nolan 1 hour. He failed. Now, I correct the contamination myself. You're going to watch me kill your mother, then I'm going to kill you. Then I'm going to purge this planet. Nolan's experiment failed. Mark's vision darkened, choking. He saw Debbie on the ground, bleeding, terrified. Saw the 10-year-old version of himself in the red room. Saw Eve screaming at him. Saw everything he'd been, everything he'd done, everything he'd chosen. And something broke, not in Mark, in the world. The glitch. 7:14 a.m. Debbie stood. Broken ribs, bleeding. She was 45 years old, human, powerless. Against an 800-year-old Viltrumite warrior. She picked up a shard of metal from the broken door. It was pathetic, useless. She charged Anissa anyway. Get away from my son. Anissa didn't even look, backhanded Debbie without releasing Mark. Debbie flew 20 feet, hit the wall, slid down, didn't move. Mark saw red, not Viltrumite red, human red, he screamed. Not words, pure rage. The sound was inhuman. His power spiked adrenaline, fury, protective instinct, something primal that Nolan's conditioning had never touched. He ripped out of Anissa's grip. She was shocked. How did you? Mark hit her. Everything, every ounce of strength, every fragment of rage, every piece of human love, twisted into human violence. Anissa flew through 6 walls. The fortress shook. Mark flew after her. Didn't stop, didn't think, just attacked. They crashed through the building into the city, into the ocean. The fight was primal, catastrophic. Mark was weaker but unhinged. You touched her. You hurt her. Anissa, bleeding. This is the human contamination. This emotion makes you weak. Then I'm weak. Mark headbutted her. Broke her nose. They surfaced. Fought in midair, traded blows that created sonic booms. The choice. 7:31 a.m. Nolan arrived. Saw Mark and Anissa destroying the coastline. Saw Debbie's broken body in the fortress medical bay. He'd taken her there, activated life support, stabilized her. He'd let his son fight. Now he watched them. Watched Mark fight like he had something worth dying for. Watched human emotion fuel Viltrumite's strength. Nolan whispered to himself, I was wrong. The human part doesn't make him weak. It makes him fight like he has something to protect. He looked at Debbie, unconscious, dying. The woman he'd used as breeding stock, as a control mechanism, as an experiment. The woman his son was willing to die for. Nolan made a choice. He flew toward the battle, not to help Anissa, to help his son. The battlefield. 7:34 a.m. Mark and Anissa were both damaged. Blood in the water, broken bones. But still fighting, Anissa saw Nolan approaching. Relief flooded her face. Finally, restrain the hybrid. I'll execute him. Nolan didn't move toward Mark. He positioned himself between them. Anissa's smile faded. Nolan, Move. No, have you lost your mind? He's contaminated. He attacked me. He's my son. The words hung in the air. 3 words. Simple. Absolute. Anissa's face twisted with rage. You're both contaminated. The Empire will hear of this. They will send Thrag. They will execute you, your son, and purge this planet to bedrock. Nolan nodded. Probably, but until then, he cracked his knuckles. You're not touching him. Anissa attacked Nolan. The fight was 800-year veteran versus 2,000-year veteran. Equally matched, the destruction was biblical. Mark watched, frozen, unable to process. His father, the man who broke him, who tortured him, who made him a weapon, was protecting him. Nolan's voice carried over the wind. Mark, get your mother to safety, now! Mark didn't question. Flew back to the fortress. To the medical bay, Debbie was stabilized but critical. He grabbed her carefully, flew away from the battle. Behind him, Nolan and Anissa tore reality apart. Mountains collapsed. Tidal waves formed. The sky turned red. Mark held his mother, felt her heartbeat, weak, irregular, but present. I've got you, Mom. You're safe. You're safe. She didn't respond. Unconscious, dying, but alive. Because Mark chose her, because Nolan, impossibly, chose them both. The glitch in the programming was complete. The weapon had become human, and the tyrant had become something else, something that might, possibly, be a father. Pacific coastline, 7:52 a.m., 6 hours post-escape. The battle between Nolan and Anissa had devastated 40 miles of coastline. Cliffs reduced to rubble. Ocean floor exposed. The sky still carried the red tint of atmospheric disruption. Anissa was wounded. First time in 300 years. Her left arm hung useless, shoulder dislocated, blood ran from her nose. But she was holding. 800 years of combat experience keeping her alive. Mark was miles away, hiding Debbie in a GDA safe house. Cecil's people working to stabilize her. She'd lost too much blood. Internal bleeding. Even with emergency surgery, her chances were 5-0-5-0. Mark had left her there, flown back to the battle. Because Nolan was fighting alone. For him, he arrived as Nolan took a brutal hit. Anissa's knee to his ribs, 3 cracked. Nolan staggered. Anissa pressed the advantage. Mark intercepted, grabbed Anissa's striking arm. She spun, surprised. You dare. She crashed into the ocean, creating a waterspout on impact. Nolan looked at Mark, blood streaming from his mouth. I told you to stay with your mother. Cecil's people have her. Mark positioned himself beside Nolan. You helped me, now I help you. Nolan's expression was unreadable then. We end this together. You're both contaminated, both defective. The Empire can try. Mark's voice was steady. But first, you're going through us. The coordinated assault. 8:04 a.m. They moved as one. First time in 8 years, Mark and Nolan fought together instead of Mark fighting under Nolan. The difference was tangible. Nolan feinted left. Anissa blocked. Mark hit her from the right. She staggered. Nolan followed up, combination strikes to her injured shoulder. She screamed. Nolan, remember your training. Remember the Empire. You swore oaths. I swore oaths before I understood what I was swearing to. Nolan's voice was cold. Before I watched my son choose humanity. Before I realized, maybe the Empire is wrong. You'll both die for this. Probably. Nolan grabbed her injured arm, twisted. But not today. Mark came in low. Sweep kick. Anissa's legs went out from under her. She fell. Nolan was already there, fist raised. Anissa caught his punch. Even wounded, even outnumbered, she was dangerous. She pulled Nolan down, drove her knee into his face. His nose exploded. Blood sprayed. Mark tackled her off Nolan. They tumbled through the air, trading blows. Anissa was stronger, more experienced. But Mark was younger, faster, and absolutely unwilling to quit. They separated, hovered, both breathing hard. I am superior in every measurable category. Then why am I still standing? Luck, nothing more. Anissa's eyes were cold. You'll tire, you'll slow, and I'll kill you. Then your mother, then this entire pathetic species. You'll have to go through both of us first. Nolan's voice. He was beside Mark now, bloodied but standing. My son and I, father and son, fighting together. The words hit Mark like a physical blow. Father and son, not commander and weapon. Family. The trap. 8:17 a.m. Eve's voice crackled over Mark's calm. Mark, we've got a plan. Robot designed a null field chamber. It'll hold a Viltrumite for 60 seconds before she breaks out. But we need her contained and stationary. Can you and your dad do that? Mark looked at Nolan. Can we? Get her there in 3 minutes, or this doesn't work. The coordinates appeared on Mark's HUD. An empty beach 2 miles south. Eve was already there, restructuring matter, creating a massive cage framework from sand and metal debris. Robot's drones carried the null field generator into position. Monster Girl stood ready, despite her broken arm. The resistance, what was left of it, had committed everything to this moment. Anissa! Nolan's voice boomed. You want to kill us? Come do it yourself. No backup, no empire. Just you and us. Anissa smiled. Gladly. She charged. Nolan and Mark flew backward, leading her. Not retreating. Luring. Anissa was too angry to see the trap. They reached the coordinates. Eve activated the framework. The cage materialized around them. 40 feet tall, reinforced steel and restructured diamond matrix. Now, Eve screamed. Nolan feinted right. Anissa blocked. Mark hit her from behind. Not hard enough to damage, hard enough to push, to position to move her exactly 3 feet to the left. Into the null field activation zone, Eve triggered it. The field erupted. Anissa froze mid-strike, suspended in null space, unable to move, unable to speak, trapped. 60 seconds until she breaks free, Robot's voice announced. What's the plan? The execution debate. 8:21 a.m. They stood around the cage. Mark, Nolan, and Eve. Anissa struggled inside, screaming soundlessly. The null field muffled everything. Eve spoke first. We kill her. She'll report back to the Empire if we don't. No. Mark's voice was firm. We've killed enough. Cecil's voice over the comm. Mark, be pragmatic. She's a threat to Earth's survival. She's also a prisoner. Executing prisoners isn't justice. It's murder. Nolan was silent, staring at Anissa. His colleague, his fellow Viltrumite, the Empire's representative, everything he'd been for 2,000 years. Mark turned to him. What do you think? I think I've been making the wrong choices for 2 millennia. You decide, Mark. I'll follow your lead. Value in life beyond power. Things the Empire eliminated from our species. Nolan's voice was quiet. So, what do we do? Mark's decision. 8:23 a.m. Mark approached the cage, looked Anissa in the eye. She stared back with pure hatred. I'm not going to kill you, but you're not leaving Earth. You're going into a cell, deep underground, and you're going to send a message to the Empire. Tell them Earth is fully pacified, that I'm loyal, that everything is fine. Do that, and you live. Defiance, rage, refusal. Mark's voice dropped. Or don't. And I kill you. Slowly. I spent 8 years learning how to dismantle living things. I know exactly where to hurt you, how to make it last, and I'm angry enough to enjoy it. Eve's eyes widened. Cecil's calm went silent. Even Nolan looked surprised. Anissa saw something in Mark's eyes. The fusion of human emotion and Viltrumite capacity for violence. The perfect weapon Nolan had created, now aimed at the Empire itself. She nodded. Slowly. Acceptance. Good. Mark stepped back. Take her to containment. Cecil's deepest black site. Viltrumite-resistant alloys. Sonic restraints. She doesn't get out. Ever. The transfer. 9:47 a.m. They moved Anissa to the black site. Subterranean facility, 300 feet down, reinforced with alloys reverse-engineered from Nolan's technology. Sonic emitters kept her weak. Disoriented. Manageable. She was placed in a cell, watched by cameras, monitored constantly. Before they sealed her in, Mark spoke through the intercom. The Empire will come eventually. When they do, they'll find Earth defended. By me, by him. He gestured to Nolan. By everyone you tried to crush. Tell them that. Tell them we're ready. Anissa spat blood. You'll die screaming when Thrag arrives, both of you. Maybe, but we'll die free. Mark turned away. Seal her in. The cell door closed. Anissa's screams were muffled, then silent. The Reckoning. 11:34 a.m. Fortress ruins. With Anissa contained, the resistance dispersed. Eve back to her safe house. Cecil to his bunker. Monster Girl to medical treatment. Mark and Nolan stood alone in the ruins of the fortress. The building was half collapsed from the battle, smoke still rising from structural fires. Mark spoke first. "Why did you help me?" Nolan was silent for a long moment, staring at the ruins, at what his conquest had built, at what his son's rebellion had destroyed. "Because I saw you fight for Debbie, and I realized I've never fought for something, only to conquer. You fought like you had something worth dying for. That's not weakness." He looked at Mark. "That's purpose. I've been alive for 2,000 years, and I've never had that. So you're saying I was right. I'm saying I was wrong. About everything. About Earth, about humanity, about you." Nolan's voice cracked. "I tortured you. I broke you. I made you watch me massacre people when you were a child. I can't undo that. I can never undo that." Mark's fists clenched. "No, you can't. I know. And I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to do better, to help you fix what I broke." Mark stared at his father, the man who destroyed his childhood, the man who just saved his life. He felt rage, grief, confusion, exhaustion, and something else, something he didn't want to feel. Residual love, the ghost of the father he thought he had at age 7. "You put me through hell. You made me a killer. You erased 8 years of my life. I know. And you think helping me fight Anissa makes up for that? No, nothing makes up for it, but it's a start." His hands were shaking. "I can't forgive you, not yet, maybe not ever. I understand, but I can't fight you anymore. I'm tired. I'm so tired." The uneasy truce. 12:03 p.m. Mark sat in the rubble. Nolan sat beside him. Not close, but present. 2 Viltrumites, father and son, war criminals, survivors. They didn't speak, just sat, watching the city slowly return to life. Humans emerging from shelters, assessing damage, beginning repairs. Eve approached cautiously. "Mark, we've got Debbie stabilized. She's asking for you." Looked at Nolan. "You don't get to see her. Not yet, maybe not ever." Nolan nodded. "I'll wait here." Whispered to himself. "I'm sorry, son. I'm so sorry." GDA medical facility. 12:34 p.m. Mark entered the room. Debbie was awake, bruised, bandaged, but alive. She saw him and smiled through tears. "Baby, you came back." The weight of 8 years crushed him. He sobbed, ugly, broken, human sobbing. Debbie held him, stroked his hair, whispered, "I've got you. You're safe. You're home." For the first time since age 10, Mark felt human. Outside, Nolan stood guard, not as conqueror, as protector, watching the sky for Empire ships, ready to fight, ready to die. For his son, the rebellion was complete. The weapon had chosen humanity, the tyrant had glimpsed redemption, and Earth, broken, bloodied, traumatized, had survived another day. Tomorrow would bring new threats. The Empire would respond. Thrag would come. But today, Mark Grayson was human. Today, that was enough. 3 weeks later, Washington, D.C. ruins. Global broadcast. 2:47 p.m. Mark stood in the ruins of what used to be the Capitol building. The fortress had been dismantled. Nolan's occupation infrastructure torn down. Governments were reforming. Slowly, painfully. But reforming. Every screen on Earth showed Mark's face. He'd called for a global broadcast. The world was watching, waiting, terrified of what the boy conqueror would say next. Mark wore civilian clothes, jeans, t-shirt, no uniform, no Viltrumite colors. Just an 18-year-old standing in the wreckage of his own choices. He spoke. "My name is Mark Grayson. For 8 years I helped conquer your planet. I killed your soldiers, I destroyed your cities. I enforced Viltrumite occupation. I was 10 years old when it started. I'm 18 now, and I don't have an excuse. I could tell you I was brainwashed, that I was a child, that my father manipulated me. All of that is true, but it doesn't erase what I did. It doesn't bring back the 2,847 people I killed. I remember their faces. I remember their names. I will carry them for the rest of my life. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm telling you I'm done being a weapon. I'm choosing to be human. And if that means you hunt me, imprison me, or execute me, I'll accept that. But until you decide, I'm going to protect you from Viltrumites, from anyone, because I owe you 2,847 lives, and I'm going to spend the rest of mine trying to balance the scale. The broadcast ended. The world was silent. Then, slowly, responses came. Divided. Some called for his execution. Some saw him as a victim. Some saw him as Earth's only defense. Cecil's official statement followed. Mark Grayson is under GDA supervision. He has agreed to serve as Earth's first line of defense in exchange for conditional amnesty. This arrangement is subject to ongoing evaluation. We're weaponizing the weapon, but at least he's our weapon now. GDA safe house. Debbie's recovery room. 1 week later, Debbie sat in a wheelchair looking out the window. 3 weeks post-injury. Still healing, the doctors said she'd walk again. Eventually, the internal damage had been severe. Mark visited daily. Today, he brought flowers, daisies, her favorite. He didn't remember that consciously. His body remembered for him. How are you feeling? He asked. Like I got hit by a Viltrumite, she smiled. Weak but genuine. But alive, that counts for something. Mark sat beside her. They were rebuilding their relationship, one conversation at a time, one memory at a time. It was slow, painful, but real. Do you remember when you were 7? Debbie asked. We went to the zoo. You wanted to see the gorillas, but you were scared to get close to the glass. Mark's voice was soft. I remember. You held my hand, told me they couldn't hurt me through the glass. You believed me. You trusted me. Debbie reached for his hand. And now I don't trust anyone, not even myself. Debbie squeezed his hand. Then we'll start there. We'll start with this, and we'll work our way back. Mark squeezed back. Small gesture. Huge meaning. Connection. Trust. Family. Mom, thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself. I'm your mother. That's not something I can give up on. She smiled through tears. You're stuck with me, baby. For better or worse. Atlanta ruins. 2 weeks later, Mark and Eve. They met where they'd first fought, where Eve had cracked his programming with a single question. The ruins were being cleared now. Reconstruction beginning. Life returning. Eve sat on a broken concrete slab. Mark hovered nearby, still not comfortable being grounded. Still ready to flee at any moment. You know everyone's terrified of you, right? Eve said. I know. They should be. You saved us. You turned on your dad. You stopped the Empire, for now. I also killed 2,847 people. I've counted. Twice. Mark landed. Stood. I've been working with Cecil. Making amends where I can, visiting families. Most slammed the door in my face. Some threatened me. One woman actually stabbed me. The knife broke. Eve winced. That's rough. It's deserved. Mark looked at his hands. I'm trying to be better. To be the person I could have been. But I don't know if that's possible. If you can come back from being a monster. You were 10. He broke you. That's not the same as choosing to be a monster, isn't it? At what point does being broken become an excuse? 12? 15? 17? When did I become responsible for my own choices? The question was too big, too complicated. So what are you going to do? She asked instead. Brood for the rest of your life? What do you want me to do? I want you to stop being the boy conqueror. I want you to be Mark, the 18-year-old kid who got dealt the worst hand in history and still chose humanity. I don't know how to be that person. I never got to learn. So learn now. You're 18. You've got centuries ahead of you. Eve stood, put her hand on his shoulder. Make them count. Mark nodded. I'm trying. Neutral location. Ocean Cliff, 3 weeks post-rebellion. Mark and Nolan, they've been avoiding this conversation. Mark healing, Nolan giving him space. But it couldn't be avoided forever. They stood on the cliff where Nolan first taught Mark to fly, where the nightmare began 8 years ago. Coming full circle. Nolan spoke first. Thank you for coming. Mark didn't respond. I've been thinking, for 3 weeks, non-stop, about what I did, what I made you do. I've relived every moment, every time I hit you, every mission I sent you on, every time I chose the Empire over you. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to understand. I can't fix it. I can't undo it. I can't give you back your childhood. Nolan's voice cracked. But I can tell you, I was wrong. The Empire is wrong, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to dismantle it for you. Mark's composure shattered. For me? You don't get to make this about me. You don't get to turn your redemption arc into my healing. I don't want you to fight the Empire for me. I want you to go away. Nolan absorbed it. I can't. And I will protect you until I die. Mark laughed bitterly. You weren't my father when I was 10. You were my commander. My torturer. You don't get to be my father now just because it's convenient. You're right. I don't. Nolan stepped closer. But I'm asking anyway. Not as your father. As a Viltrumite who's finally seeing clearly. Help me destroy the Empire. Help me make sure no other hybrid child goes through what you did. Mark stared, saw the man who broke him, the man who saved him, the man who would never be forgiven but was trying anyway. I will work with you, not for you, not as your son, as an ally. We will prepare for when the Empire responds. We will defend Earth, and when it's done, you will leave Earth. Forever. Do you accept? I accept. They didn't hug, didn't shake hands, just nodded. Warriors acknowledging a shared mission. 6 months later, the Empire's response. The sky split, a transmission from deep space, broadcast to Earth, to Nolan, to Mark. Thrag's voice. Ancient, cold, absolute. Nolan of Earth. Your deception has been noted. Agent Anissa's silence was transparent. The Empire is aware of your treason. We are coming. You have 6 months to prepare. Use them wisely. You will not survive our arrival. The transmission ended. Mark and Nolan stood in the GDA command center. Cecil smoked his cigarette. Eve stood ready. Donald reviewed defense protocols. The Resistance, now Earth's official defense force, assembled. 6 months, Cecil said. We'll need to train, build defenses, rally allies. Nolan looked at Mark. Can we do it? Who accidentally hurt his friend, who watched his heroes die, who was broken and rebuilt as a weapon. That boy was dead, would always be dead, but something of him remained, the part that still remembered being human, the part that chose his mother over the Empire, the part that refused to kill the only people who still saw him as a person. Yes, Mark said. We can do it. And when Thrag comes, he's going to learn something the Empire forgot. What's that? Eve asked. Mark looked at his mother through the observation window, at Cecil, at Eve, at the humans who'd fought against him and then fought beside him, at Earth, broken, traumatized, but still standing. That humans don't surrender, that we protect our own, that you can break us, but we put ourselves back together. Mark's voice was steel, and that I'm not the boy conqueror anymore. I'm Earth's protector, and anyone who threatens my home answers to me. Nolan watched his son, saw the person he'd tried to kill finally, fully alive, whispered, "That's my boy." But for the first time in 8 years, the words didn't make him flinch. 1 year later, the battle for Earth. Thrag's fleet arrived as promised, 20 Viltrumite warriors, the Empire's finest. They came to reclaim Earth, to execute the traitors, to show the galaxy what happened to worlds that defied the Empire. They were met by Mark Grayson, Nolan Grayson, Adam Eve, the reformed guardians of the globe, and millions of humans who refused to kneel. The battle lasted 4 days. The casualties were catastrophic. Cities burned. Thousands died. But Earth held. Mark fought at the front, no longer the efficient weapon, no longer following programming, just a young man defending his home with everything he had. On the 4th day, Thrag himself descended, faced Mark and Nolan together, the Grand Regent versus the traitor and his hybrid son. The fight was apocalyptic, but Mark had learned something in 8 years of being a weapon. Precision beats power, strategy beats strength, and fighting for something beats fighting for nothing. Thrag retreated, not defeated, wounded, but alive. He withdrew his forces, broadcast a final message. This is not over. The Empire will return. And next time we bring everything. The transmission ended. Earth celebrated. Victory. Survival. Mark stood in the ruins, battered and bleeding, but alive. Debbie found him, held him. You did it, baby. You saved us. We did it, Mark corrected. All of us. 2 years later, Mark's apartment, Cleveland. Mark Grayson, age 20, lived in a modest apartment. No fortress, no occupation infrastructure, just a normal place in his hometown. He worked with the GDA, responded to threats, protected people, made amends where he could. Some families forgave him, most didn't. He kept trying anyway. Debbie visited weekly. They had dinner, talked, laughed, slowly rebuilding what Nolan had destroyed. Eve stopped by often. They weren't together. Too much history, too much trauma. But they were friends. Real friends. The kind that understood each other's darkness. Nolan lived on the outskirts of the solar system. Self-imposed exile. He defended Earth from external threats but didn't come planet-side. Gave Mark space. Honored the agreement. They spoke occasionally. Not father and son, but allies. Maybe someday more, maybe not. Time would tell. The Empire watched, waited, planned. Thrag would return, someday, with greater forces, greater fury. But Earth was ready. Mark was ready. He stood on his apartment balcony watching the sunset. The same sun that had set on his childhood 8 years ago, when the world ended and the nightmare began. That boy was dead. Would always be dead. But Mark Grayson, the man he'd chosen to become, was alive. He'd been a victim. He'd been a weapon. He'd been a monster. Now he was trying to be a hero. It didn't erase the past, didn't absolve his crimes, didn't bring back the 2,847 people whose names he carried, but it was a start. And for Mark Grayson, child soldier, broken weapon, reluctant protector, a start was enough. The stars emerged. Somewhere out there, the Empire was coming. Mark smiled. Let them come. Earth had survived his conquest. It would survive theirs too, because Earth had something the Empire didn't understand. Hope, resilience, humanity, and Mark Grayson, Earth's lethal protector, standing watch. Forever. Mark stands on his balcony. Behind him, a photo on his shelf. Mark, age 7, smiling with his parents. Beside it, a list. 2,847 names. The people he killed. He reads one name each night, remembers, honors. In front of him, the city, alive, thriving, protected. Above him, the stars. Where the Empire waits, Mark closes his eyes, breathes, opens them, ready. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.